Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today I am bringing to you a very special video. This is not a preview of any award show or anything like that. Yesterday I posted a list on Facebook of all 81 movies that I had seen in 2015, either in theaters or on Netflix. If I saw a movie on Netflix, it's because that movie didn't come to my theater for whatever reason. And in that list of movies, I not only listed the movie, but also gave it a grade of 0 to 10 on how good or bad the movie was. And now what I'm going to do is reveal to you what I think were the top 10 worst films of 2015. At this time of the year, a lot of film buffs are posting their best and worst lists in both written and video form, which is what I'm doing. I have a written list on my Facebook page, but then I also have this video which I linked onto my Facebook page, so that way I can explain more in depth about why I feel these movies were the worst of 2015. Now, a lot of people often like to put up their best films list first and their worst films list second. I, however, like to do it the opposite because I feel it's better to get the worst films out of the way and get all that anger and rage out of the way first so that I can express the joy and happiness of the best movies of 2015 later. Now, before I get into my top 10, I want to talk about my dishonorable mentions, and I have 5 of them. These movies were bad and disappointing, but they just weren't bad enough to make my top 10 list. First up, is Our Brand is Crisis. This movie starred Sandra Bullock and Billy Bob Thornton as these two political campaign specialists who are working on opposing sides of a presidential election in Bolivia, and while the performances are very good, the movie at times is very unfocused, and it feels more like an Adam Sandler film, because Sandra Bullock and Billy Bob Thornton are both trying to outdo each other with these wacky pranks that you would normally see in an Adam Sandler movie, and that I felt detracted a lot from the film. This film didn't know whether it wanted to be a comedy or a drama, and when you have a film that does that, good things don't usually happen as a result. My next dishonorable mention is Chappie, and I wish I didn't have to put this on my dishonorable mentions list because Neil Blomkamp, who directed this movie, he's a very established director. I still haven't seen District 9, unfortunately, but everyone I know who's seen that have said it's amazing, and some have even called it a masterpiece. I did see Elysium, which I thought was quite good. I even liked some elements that not a lot of other people liked, like Jodie Foster's performance. A lot of people thought her accent was too weird in that movie, but I liked her in that movie, and I liked almost everything else in the movie. I felt the message was a little too heavy-handed at times, but good movie nonetheless. With Chappie, this movie has a great concept, but the execution of it is just very poor. In this film, the titular robot named Chappie, who was designed by Dev Patel, gets kidnapped by a bunch of gangsters named Yolandi and Ninja. And they have these names because these gangsters are played by people whose names really are Yolandi and Ninja. At least those are their stage names. They're played by this man and woman who are a rap duo in South Africa named D. Antwoord. And I feel that the primary focus on them trying to teach Chappie how to be a gangster, complete with the gold bling and everything else that is very stereotypical of gangster movies, I felt it was very stereotypical and detracted from what should have been the main focus, namely the established stars like Dev Patel, Hugh Jackman, and Sigourney Weaver, because when it focuses on those actors, the story becomes about man versus machine. Can machines do everything that humans can? Should they replace humans in jobs like police officers and things like that? And I wish that this film explored it more, because if it had, I think it would have been a much better film. And also there's a lot of blatant product placement in Chappie, particularly Red Bull. Dev Patel, his character has a fridge full of Red Bull, and when he takes out a can and drinks it, the Red Bull logo is clearly pointed at the camera. Granted, there are other films with much worse product placement, but any film I feel that resorts to blatant product placement, unless it's part of the story, that really is a big detraction for me. Next, Unfriended. This movie, I think, had an interesting concept and a great message it was trying to relay, mainly about how social media and bullying can make a person's life a living hell. because it's about these kids who, on the anniversary of this girl that committed suicide because she had been bullied through social media from an embarrassing video. I feel if the movie had gone in depth as to why this girl was bullied and why she took her own life. I mean, we find out why she takes her own life at the very end, but if it had focused on the actual bullying aspect and not just on these kids getting haunted by the ghost of this girl through Skype, then the film would have been actually a great horror film with a great message. Now, this film actually does have a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, like a 63% last time I checked, but I just felt it wasn't as good as it could have been. And also, all of the main characters in this movie, by the end of the film, you have no sympathy for them whatsoever. That probably was the intent of the filmmaker, but usually in these films you gotta have at least one sympathetic person to latch onto, and this movie does not have that at all. So, very disappointing in that regard. The Perfect Guy. This film is just very campy and over the top. Now, the performances I thought were really good. Sanaa Lathan, I thought she was great as this woman who is trying to protect herself from her psychotic ex-boyfriend that stalks her at her every turn. And the titular perfect guy, the psycho ex-boyfriend, I thought Michael Ealy did a pretty good job of playing him, although I think he was a little too over the top at times and really chewed his scenery way too much. And plus the plot itself is very predictable, so that combined with the cheesy factor just makes this a very campy stalker film. And finally, Get Hard. Now, I've heard of some people who really love this movie and others who've really hated it. I'm kind of in the middle. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell actually made me laugh quite a number of times. But this film has so many offensive gay jokes, racial jokes, and prison rape jokes that just really aren't funny at all. You wonder how Kevin Hart, Will Ferrell, the director, the producers found all of this funny. And you wonder how the people who really love this movie found this stuff funny. I didn't. But it could have been a lot worse, and thankfully it wasn't. But yeah, Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell, you did not do good this time. Hopefully if you make any other movies together they'll be better, but this one was not good. Alright, now on to my actual top 10. Here we go. Number 10, Ricky and the Flash. This is the only movie on my list that actually has a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's in like the 60s, so it's a very low fresh rating, but a fresh rating nonetheless. Now, this film did have a lot of good things in it. Meryl Streep had a fabulous performance, and the music sung in the film was excellent, from original songs like Cold One to Meryl Streep's covers of songs like American Girl by Tom Petty and My Love Won't Let You Down by Bruce Springsteen. That was really good. And the supporting performances by Mamie Gummer, Meryl Streep's real-life daughter, who plays her daughter in this movie. She was good. So was Kevin Kline as Meryl Streep's ex-husband and Audra McDonald as Kevin Kline's new wife. But I felt the film was just too unfocused in its storylines. It was trying to be two movies at once, with Meryl Streep trying to reconnect with her grown children and trying to help her daughter whose husband just left her. And they just mash up together in a way that doesn't work at all. And a lot of the actors are very underused on screen, particularly Audra McDonald. She has this one great scene with Meryl Streep, but then she doesn't appear again till the end of the movie, and she doesn't really do anything there. Because the end of the movie features a wedding, and she, other than Meryl Streep, no one else really does anything. And then Ben Platt plays this bartender character who's like a big fan of Meryl Streep. She and her band play every night in a bar, and his character could have been completely cut out of the movie and it wouldn't have affected the plot at all. So you not only had unnecessary characters, but underused characters, and a plot that was too muddled. Which is a shame, because Diablo Cody, who won an Oscar for her screenplay for Juno, wrote the script, and Jonathan Demme, who won an Oscar for directing The Silence of the Lambs, directed this movie. So the fact that you had an Oscar-winning director and screenwriter at the helm of this movie just makes it very sad that this movie wasn't as good as it could have been. Number 9, The Longest Ride. It's a Nicholas Sparks movie. What can you say? Now, there were some good things about it. Britt Robertson was very good as the female lead, and Alan Alda was excellent as this old man that Britt Robertson befriends and whose love letters to his late wife she finds a lot of inspiration in. But a lot of the other actors were either kind of underutilized or just not good at all, particularly Scott Eastwood. Scott Eastwood got this movie for two reasons. Number one, he's Clint Eastwood's son, and number two, he's the kind of man who women will immediately fall for because of his looks. In fact, in the theater I was in when I watched this movie, this whole group of women were sitting in the same row as me, and they were all like, ooh, yeah, when Scott Eastwood kept appearing on screen. And there's a certain scene, and if you've seen the movie, you'll know exactly what it is. They didn't go crazy, but you could tell they were enjoying what they were watching very much. This is all I needed for this movie. I don't know if they liked the movie as a whole, but for Scott Eastwood's looks, they were definitely very happy about that. And the story itself is muddled as well. They have to try to have these two stories, one set in the present day between Scott Eastwood and Britt Robertson, and another set way in the past featuring Jack Huston as the younger version of Alan Alda's character, and Oona Chaplin as the woman who became his wife and some of the struggles they were going through. I feel if the movie had focused more on Jack Huston and Oona Chaplin, it would have been a much better movie because their story was more compelling in my opinion. But overall, this film, it has every Nicholas Sparks cliche that people either love or hate about his books and the movies based on his books. And it just is a very cliched romance film in general because you can tell exactly how the movie's going to end. Nothing at all in the plot surprises you. It's just a generic, cheesy romance film that keeps getting made because audiences keep flocking to see it, and they aren't willing to demand things of a more higher quality. Number 8, Jupiter Ascending. Was this movie like the equivalent of an acid trip without actually taking acid? Mila Kunis gives a very flat performance as the titular character of Jupiter Jones, who discovers that she is the heir to becoming Queen of the Universe. No, I'm not making that up. And just a lot of plot elements in this film make no sense, like how bees can recognize Jupiter as the Queen of the Universe and don't really provide an explanation for it. And just the dialogue itself is very cheesy. There's a whole exchange between Mila Kunis and Channing Tatum about dogs, and they're trying to flirt with each other, and I was like, really? You're flirting with each other about dogs? And Channing Tatum, his performance was very wooden in my opinion, and he was playing a character that was like half alien, half dog. It just didn't make sense. And then Eddie Redmayne. Oh boy. Eddie Redmayne gave one of the weirdest and yet most hilarious performances I've seen in a long time. He talks in this weird whisper like, I must conquer this planet tomorrow. No, that's literally what he sounds like. And he's wearing this black leather cape costume with like this black lipstick. It just looks weird. I'm guessing he signed on to this film because he's a big fan of the Wachowskis and their good films like The Matrix. But the Wachowskis' direction was just bad in this movie. All the performances, I blame not on the actors having no talent, but just on the Wachowskis' directing style. When you have two siblings direct, I often wonder, how do they do it? Do they all direct scenes equally? Does one sibling direct certain scenes and the other direct the other scenes? I don't know, but it just feels like the directing was not very focused in this movie. Number 7, Serena. This is one of the worst book-to-film adaptations I have ever seen, because Serena, which was originally a novel by Ron Rash, is an excellent novel. It's almost kind of like a take on Macbeth, but set during the early days of the Great Depression, in which this husband and wife will go to any lengths to eliminate any rivals in their way. And the titular character of Serena, who's played here by Jennifer Lawrence, she's willing to go so far as to try and have the illegitimate child that her husband fathered before he married her killed along with the child's mother. But the way this film was presented, the editing was so choppy and terrible. It feels like this film was originally 2.5 hours long, but choppily edited up so it could only be 110 minutes long. I don't know if it was much longer than what we saw, but that's what it feels like. And apart from Jennifer Lawrence, the acting in the film is not good at all, especially Bradley Cooper. He keeps doing all these various accents that he can't pick to use throughout the movie, and they just sound terrible. And the sets for this movie, because this movie is supposed to be taking place in a lumber camp, I read a critic's review where they said the sets look too clean, and this critic was absolutely right, because when you see a lumber camp, you want to see dirt and dust and grime everywhere and blood and sweat, because spending your days logging trees is dirty work, and in the book they go into extensive detail about logging in the winter versus logging in the summer and how it can be sometimes a fatal process. So I wish we would have seen more of that, how logging itself is a physically exhausting business. And the ending. They completely changed the ending for this movie so that it feels very anticlimactic and like we waited all this time for that, because the book has a very karma-like ending. I can't spoil it here because I don't want to ruin how epically awesome it is, the karma-like ending of the book. But if you have not read the original novel by Ron Rash and you've seen this movie, Serena, go read the original novel and you'll see just how much they missed out on making a truly great movie, because this could have been a truly great movie, but it wasn't. Number 6, The Boy Next Door. Ugh, this is one of the cheesiest stalker films I have ever seen. Ryan Guzman, who plays the titular boy next door, although his character's technically 20, so that doesn't really make him a boy, but I guess the title makes sense in this case because he becomes obsessed with Jennifer Lopez's character, and she's obviously much older than him, is so hammy that you want to laugh, because it's like he was told to watch Fatal Attraction a dozen times and then act exactly like Glenn Close's character in that movie, but ham it up to the ultimate level. And as a result, you don't take him very seriously as a stalker, and when he finally meets his fate, you're so glad he meets that fate, because that way you don't have to hear his voice anymore. And apart from somewhat decent acting by Jennifer Lopez, Kristen Chenoweth, and John Corbett, and the actor who plays Jennifer Lopez's son, I forget what his name is, apart from that, the film is very predictable, very cliched, and you call out everything before you see it. Number 5, Seventh Son. This film had arguably one of the worst performances of the year from an Academy Award-winning actor, in this case, Jeff Bridges. I don't know whose idea it was. I'm assuming it must have been the director's, and if it was Jeff Bridges' idea, then I'm really gobsmacked, because Jeff Bridges speaks with a voice in this movie that is so annoying you just want to shout, "Speak normally!" This is how Jeff Bridges talks in Seventh Son. "They all died. We are the last ones left." I mean, it sounds like he has something stuck in his throat that he can't get out, and he's trying to talk despite it, this thing choking on his voice box. I just don't know why he speaks with that kind of voice. I mean, he's trying to play like a wise wizard-like character, but he didn't need to speak with a voice like that. I mean, if you want to see a great wise wizard voice, watch Richard Harris and Michael Gambon as Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films, or Ian McKellen as Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. That's what a wise wizard voice should sound like. And Ben Barnes, who plays the titular Seventh Son, he's okay, but not amazing. And Alicia Vikander, who's been in a lot of movies this year, she plays the stereotypical love interest, but who also is connected to the villains, and you're not surprised at all when you find that out. She does okay, but you can tell that she's trying to make bad lines sound good. And then the one redeeming factor in this movie, in my opinion, was Julianne Moore. I've heard from some who thought she was the worst thing in this movie, and this is not her greatest performance, but she holds this movie down the best she can, and she's at least trying. She's trying with, I mean, it feels like even she knows that this is a bad movie with terrible dialogue and a generic story, and that, I mean, I don't know why she did this movie, but she's doing the best she can to try and at least give somewhat of a believable performance. And the visual effects in this movie were not great at all. They weren't the worst visual effects ever, but given the fact that this film has been delayed multiple times but prior to its theatrical release, you would have thought they were taking that time to improve upon the visual effects, but they weren't. They just come off as very obvious CGI, and they really detract from some of the beautiful natural locations that they used as scenery for this movie. So, what a missed opportunity. Number 4, The Last Witch Hunter. They were clearly trying to establish a new franchise of films with this movie, but they just failed miserably. Not only is the story greatly underdeveloped, but the performances, with the exception of Michael Caine, just don't match up to par. Vin Diesel is Vin Diesel. You know, he talks in a very monotone voice like this, the kind of voice he uses in every single movie. And then Rose Leslie from Game of Thrones, her character, you know, is a complete waste, and she tries her best, but even she can't salvage the awful dialogue she's given. The witches in this movie look terrible. You know, I mean, they have like a human form and then their true witch form, and their true witch form is an absolute joke. I would not expect a witch to look like that at all, and witches should not look like that. It was almost as bad as the look of the witches in Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. Elijah Wood's character has one of the most left out-of-field plot twists I have ever seen. When it comes so fast, you barely have time to absorb it, and it just doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of the story. So, I mean, the story itself could have been made into like kind of a, yeah, it was okay kind of a movie, but just the terrible visuals, the terrible acting, and the terrible writing and directing just made this one of the worst Halloween movies you can ever see. Number 3, The Cobbler. This film could have served as a much-needed comeback for Adam Sandler, given just how bad his films in the last 5 years have been. But no, this film just keeps him right at the bottom. And it's a shame because the director of this film, Tom McCarthy, not only has made one of the absolute worst films of the year, but as you'll see in my best of list that'll come out tomorrow, he also made one of the absolute best films of the year with Spotlight. So how he was able to make a movie this bad by both directing and writing it, I just don't know. Now granted, Adam Sandler doesn't necessarily play a man-child with an annoying voice, but he still tries to use a scheme, in this case magic shoes, to have fun and wreck other people's lives at their expense, and it just becomes very annoying after a while. And not only annoying, this movie is downright boring. I lost count of how many times I kept falling asleep in this movie because it's only like 98 minutes or something. I forget. But it felt like it was 4 hours long. I'm not kidding. And I just kept praying, please, let this be over. Let this be over. And there's so many good actors in this movie whose talent is just completely wasted. Lynn Cohen, who plays Adam Sandler's mother in this film, you might know her best as Magda from Sex and the City or Mags from The Hunger Games Catching Fire. She has barely any screen time, and her character dies halfway through the movie, and we barely even get to know her. And then Ellen Barkin. Ellen Barkin plays like this female mob boss, which we don't normally see in movies, so they could have had a great chance to create something that we've never seen before. And she's trying her best with what she's got, but her character just doesn't add anything to the movie. It just makes an already bad storyline even worse. And it makes it more confusing. Like, we have these magical shoes and this mob boss who's trying to kick an old man out of his apartment that he's lived in for like 50 years, you know, how are these supposed to connect? It just doesn't work. And then Steve Buscemi. Steve Buscemi, he's appeared in a lot of Adam Sandler movies. I'm guessing they must either be good friends, maybe they're neighbors. But he always tries to be like the one good actor in an Adam Sandler movie. But like Lynn Cohen and Ellen Barkin, his character is just completely wasted. And then there's the most wasted person of all, Dustin Hoffman. We don't see Dustin Hoffman till like the last 10 minutes of the movie, and when they reveal the purpose of his character, you're like, what? Really? And then they hardly even they kind of explain it. It just isn't good enough to justify the whole rest of the story that's happened before. This film just has one of the most incoherent, messy plots you will ever see, and it's just so boring that if you're having trouble falling asleep, just go sit on your couch in front of your TV, turn on Netflix if you have it, put on this movie and just let it put you to sleep because it is a great sleeping pill. Number 2, Pixels. Now this film does have a more coherent plot than The Cobbler, but it's executed way, way worse. You have Kevin James playing the President of the United States, who has the literacy level of a 5-year-old. You have Josh Gad as this weird loner who lives in his grandma's garage, watches One Tree Hill on VHS, and is romantically obsessed with a female video game character named Lady Lisa. And he shouts every single one of his lines, and you just want to cover your ears because it is that painful to listen to. He yells all these insults at Navy SEALs, and you just want one of them to punch him in the face because he insults them so badly. It's like, just stop already. You're asking to be punched in the face or the balls. And then Peter Dinklage, he plays this character who wants to have a threesome with Serena Williams and Martha Stewart in the Lincoln bedroom of the White House. And then you have these small roles of Jane Krakowski as the First Lady of the United States. She barely has any spoken dialogue. Sean Bean as a corporal who's trying to convince people that the alien fights that breaks out is a beer commercial. If you haven't seen this movie, what it's about is these classic video game characters from the 80s like Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Centipede are sent to Earth as weapons by aliens because a time capsule was sent into space, and these aliens thought that Earth was declaring war on them, so they're declaring war right back. And the people who fight these aliens as video game characters are people who were kids during the time that these games were popular. And then you have Adam Sandler. Now, like in The Cobbler, Adam Sandler's not necessarily playing a man-child character with a really annoying voice, but Adam Sandler just looks bored as hell. He clearly only did this movie for the money. His character's only there so that he and Michelle Monaghan can become a couple. And then there's Michelle Monaghan. She tries the best she can, but the character just does these really weird things. Her husband left her for a 19-year-old Pilates instructor named Cinnamon with an S instead of a C. And what does she do? She drinks wine in the closet, which I could see some women doing if their husband left them for a 19-year-old Pilates instructor. But she drinks wine out of a sippy cup. And she has a kid, but the kid is like 12 years old. So why is she drinking it out of a sippy cup? Does the kid still drink from a sippy cup? Does she have a strong emotional attachment to it? The movie never explains. It's just bizarre. Didn't need to be in there. And then also, this movie has some of the worst messages about meeting the woman of your dreams. It sends a message that a stereotypical nerd is always going to be unlucky in love, and that Adam Sandler even goes so far as to say nerds are the best kissers because we appreciate it more. And it also sends a horrible message that you can literally have the woman of your dreams as a trophy, because Josh Gad's character, because the Lady Lisa character is literally brought to life in human form, and she's literally becomes a trophy wife for Josh Gad's character. It's kind of a spoiler for the end of the movie, but I don't care. There's something else that happens, and those of you who've seen Pixels, at the very end, you know exactly what I mean, but it's just so bad I just can't talk about it. I really can't. This movie, it could have been a nice, fun summer movie, but it just failed on nearly every possible level. Alright, number 1. The absolute worst film of 2015, in my opinion, is Hot Pursuit. This could have been at least somewhat of a funny movie, but it was one of the most painful movie-going experiences I've ever had. I was sitting in a nice, reclinable leather chair in the theater, and I was squirming in it because I was so bored, even though this film is only like 85 minutes long. And not only is it boring, but there's only like 1 or 2 jokes in the beginning that made me laugh. And it just has all these awful stereotypes. You have Sofia Vergara playing the widow of a big drug dealer, and I guess the movie's trying to say, well, if someone's Hispanic, they're only wealthy because they're either the drug dealer or a wife of a drug dealer. That's a very poor message to send right there. And Sofia Vergara herself, the way she talks in this movie and the way she like yells and screams and just her character in general is one of the worst female characters I have ever seen. You know, I like Sofia Vergara a lot. She's very funny on Modern Family. I've liked her in other movies I've seen, like Chef, but here, I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know what the director was thinking. And then Reese Witherspoon. You know, Reese Witherspoon's a great actress. I think she's trying the best she can, but even she can't save this movie because her character also makes a lot of bad decisions, and she's a police officer, and at one point, her character resorts to disguising herself as Justin Bieber. I'm not kidding. Justin Bieber. And that makes me especially mad because of those of you who know me personally, you know how much I hate Justin Bieber. He's like the #1 celebrity I hate. Just cannot stand him. And, you know, I just don't understand what they were trying to do with this movie. They were trying to make it obviously kind of a funny female buddy movie, but it just doesn't work. And then there's this awful subplot about Reese Witherspoon and Sofia Vergara having to pretend to be a lesbian couple while the police are looking for them because they have to go on the run after all these shenanigans go down. And it just, I mean, clearly they were trying to make it funny, the whole lesbian couple subplot, but it was just cringeworthy. I mean, it just, I don't know what they were thinking. And, you know, there's a lot of talk in Hollywood about, you know, about women being portrayed on film and women not having enough opportunities to do things like directing. But I just don't understand how this film, which was directed by a woman, can depict women in such a bad light. I mean, you would think a woman director would want to portray women, even if it was going to be in a comedic sense, in a positive manner. But they don't. It's just so awful. I never want to watch this movie again. It's that bad, people. It really is. If you don't believe me, go check out both the Rotten Tomatoes critics score for this movie and the Cinema Score audience grade for this movie. Because a lot of times, you know, audiences on Cinema Score will give good ratings to films that got a negative review on Rotten Tomatoes, but not this time, because this film was a big box office bomb. It certainly didn't help that it came out a week after Avengers Age of Ultron, and a week before Pitch Perfect 2 and Mad Max Fury Road. But even so, this movie was the box office bomb that it deserved to be. And if you're one of those people who needs to watch a bad movie just to see how bad it is, don't say I didn't warn you, because this film is as bad as it can get. The only reason why I gave it a 1 out of 10 and not a 0 is because of the 2 jokes that made me chuckle in the beginning. But everything else is not redeemable in the slightest. And if this film does not get Razzie nominations across the board, like Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actress for both Sofia Vergara and Reese Witherspoon, Worst Screen Duo, again for Sofia Vergara and Reese Witherspoon, if the Razzies do not recognize this film, I will be upset. I will be as upset as the people who were upset about the lack of Oscar recognition for the movie Drive 4 years ago. However, the Razzies, they love to pour the crap over movies like Hot Pursuit. So I have a feeling it's going to be the strong contender that it deserves. So overall, that's my list of the worst films of 2015. Just a quick recap. My dishonorable mentions were Our Brand is Crisis, Chappie, Unfriended, The Perfect Guy, and Get Hard. And my actual top 10 list was as follows. Number 10, Ricky and the Flash. Number 9, The Longest Ride. Number 8, Jupiter Ascending. Number 7, Serena. Number 6, The Boy Next Door. Number 5, Seventh Son. Number 4, The Last Witch Hunter. Number 3, The Cobbler. Number 2, Pixels. And number 1, Hot Pursuit. So let me know what you think of my worst movies of 2015. Be sure to write what you think are the 10 worst movies of 2015 in the comment section below. And please subscribe to my channel so that way you can get more videos as they come. Thanks for watching. Bye.